Husband and I had threesome he wanted. He left in the middle of it. How do I proceed? The past 8 years of my life with my husband had felt like a beautiful blend of companionship and love. We'd been together since I was 22, weathering every high and low together. He was my first and only real experience when it came to romance and intimacy. As we reached our 8th year together, with 3 of those as a married couple, our conversations about opening up our relationship took on a new level of curiosity. We felt safe enough, or so I thought, to explore what we'd only talked about before. It was a chance to add a new layer to our relationship, something we'd both discussed openly and in depth. After weeks of discussing every detail and defining boundaries, we decided to give it a try. We agreed to start with one of our mutual friends, a close female friend who had been in an open relationship for years. She knew us, knew the dynamics of our marriage, and it felt like the safest choice. We spoke endlessly about keeping things strictly physical. For me, this wasn't an emotional journey. It was simply exploring something new with the one person I loved, ensuring we communicated and understood each other fully. We spent countless nights going over rules, talking about transparency, and setting clear boundaries. Communication was the golden rule. No surprises, no secrets. Our friends even called it overkill with how much we emphasized this, but it was vital to me that we stayed connected through it all. Finally, the day came. We had traveled out of state to visit friends and family, planning to catch up with our mutual friend who was aware of our plans and respected our boundaries. I assumed it was just a regular hangout, nothing more. No plans had been mentioned by my husband. But around 11:30 p.m., he pulled me aside and casually mentioned he wanted to proceed that night with her. This was news to me. I hadn't prepared mentally for it, and I was exhausted after the day's activities. She quickly pulled me aside, confirming that he had expressed the same to her. Caught off guard, I didn't immediately want to participate, partly because I was surprised and tired, and partly because I felt blindsided by the sudden push. Hey everyone, we're trying to rebuild trust after my husband's betrayal, but it's been anything but easy. Therapy's brought up some deep issues, and I'm not sure if we can really make it through this. What do you think? Can trust ever be fully restored? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit ***, subscribe *** if you want to see where this journey leads. After a bit of back and forth and some truth or dare games to ease into it, I decided to join in. I wanted to make the best of the night, trust my husband, and enjoy something we had talked about for so long. Things started out fine, and after I took a quick shower to prep, I returned to find him already done, simply watching. The evening continued with me and our friend, and honestly, it was enjoyable. But something in my husband's demeanor shifted. He grew distant, barely speaking, and then, without any warning, he walked out of the house, leaving both of us confused and alarmed. My friend and I scrambled to get dressed and rushed out after him, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. When we caught up to him, he finally opened up, venting about feeling insecure and uncomfortable. He admitted he felt jealous seeing me with someone else, which had completely killed his mood. I was stunned. We'd talked about this at length. Jealousy was something he'd assured me wouldn't be an issue. We had established rules and boundaries, and I thought he was prepared, that he understood what this would entail. At first, I did my best to reassure him, but something didn't feel right. Why hadn't he told me he was uncomfortable before things escalated? My friend, who had patiently waited, eventually excused herself, leaving us to talk privately. That's when the truth began to unravel. He confessed that he'd felt bad watching our friend with me, seeing her go down on me while I enjoyed it. He had let those feelings build up without saying a word, and then he'd left, but things only got messier from there. As my friend was leaving, she turned to me, almost hesitantly, and shared something shocking. She had assumed everything had been prearranged. In fact, she had been in communication with him for weeks about this night. I was dumbfounded. I thought this was spontaneous, yet she revealed that he'd been sexting her and discussing our plans for a month, reassuring her repeatedly that I knew, that I was fully on board. I was blindsided again. Everything I thought I knew was turned on its head. She even showed me their messages, proving he had assured her over and over that I was aware of every detail, when in reality, I'd known nothing. That's when it all hit me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or misplaced jealousy. My husband had broken every rule we'd set, shattered the trust we'd built. He'd hidden things, made arrangements without telling me, and essentially manipulated both of us into going along with it. And to make matters worse, he had taken things further with her before I even joined. Something I'd only discovered because he openly announced it to us both. The betrayal felt raw, deep, and like an intentional disregard of everything we'd agreed upon. Our argument continued well into the early hours of the morning. I held nothing back, expressing every hurt and betrayal, demanding answers he couldn't provide. He admitted to lying, to pushing boundaries, and confessed that he didn't truly believe I'd be as involved as I ended up being. He didn't have an explanation, no justifiable reason, only the weak assumption that, because I was open to exploring, it somehow made it okay for him to proceed without my knowledge. I was livid. For 4 hours, I laid everything bare, questioning how he could so carelessly break down the trust that had taken years to build. At one point, he admitted he thought he could just enjoy himself and that it wouldn't matter. When I confronted him about his jealousy, he tried to deflect by saying it wasn't fair that I was the one receiving more attention, even though he'd already had his moment before I joined in. Everything felt twisted and hurtful, and by dawn, we were both drained and emotionally exhausted. After that night, I told him he needed to seek therapy if there was any hope for us. He agreed, and I chose to stay behind with our friends for a couple of weeks while he returned home. My emotions were all over the place: anger, sadness, numbness. I'd never felt so betrayed, not just by his actions, but by the way he had manipulated everything from the start. My friend, on the other hand, was incredibly supportive. She was just as blindsided as I was and offered her unwavering support, apologizing for her part, though she hadn't done anything wrong. In the days that followed, I confided in close friends, people who'd known us for years. They were shocked, supportive, and gave me the reassurance I needed. I could still feel love for my husband, but I felt a sense of distance that was new, a growing realization that the person I thought I knew wasn't who he truly was. After some time, I got an update from a mutual friend that he'd signed up for therapy and had already attended his first session. It was a small step, but it brought a tiny flicker of hope that maybe, somehow, he'd learned to understand the damage he'd done. However, part of me wasn't sure if therapy could fix this breach of trust. I was beginning to realize that even if he grew from this, there might be wounds too deep for healing, fractures in the foundation of our marriage that couldn't be undone. As I sat with these thoughts, I wondered what the next few weeks would bring. Would he reach a place of understanding? Would he genuinely take responsibility for the pain he'd caused? And, perhaps most daunting of all, would I ever be able to let go of this betrayal enough to move forward with him? I wanted to believe there was a way back, a way to heal, but each time I replayed that night, the hurt felt fresh. The days after our argument blurred together in a haze of emotions. Staying with our friends gave me some comfort and clarity, but also left me with an ache I couldn't shake. I loved my husband deeply. I couldn't just erase 8 years together. But the lies, the disregard for our boundaries, and the way he'd twisted things to get what he wanted without any thought for how I might feel. That was a wound that ran deep. Each day, as I replayed his words, his betrayal, the trust between us felt more fragile, like a thin thread I wasn't sure could ever be mended. During those weeks, I tried to find myself again. Our friends were a huge support, offering distractions with late-night talks, hikes, and even taking me to an art class I'd always wanted to try. I found a strange solace in painting, in pouring my confusion and anger onto a canvas. And yet, my mind would drift back to him, to the man I thought I knew, and the uncertainty that now hung between us. One evening, as I was watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my husband. His tone was different, softer, almost vulnerable. He wrote, "I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I understand if you don't want to come home, but I need you to know that I'm trying to change. Therapy's been harder than I thought, but I'm committed, and if there's ever a way to earn your trust back, I'll do whatever it takes." Reading his words left me feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to believe he could change, that he was finally facing his insecurities and the damage he'd caused. But I was also wary. Could someone really change that deeply, especially after a betrayal this severe? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat with those words, wondering if he could be the man I once believed him to be, or if this was just another layer of denial on his part. The night before I was set to return home, I had a long talk with Jenna, the friend who had been my rock through this entire ordeal. She sat beside me, listening as I voiced all my fears, my hopes, my doubts. "Sarah," she said gently, "whatever you decide, remember that you deserve honesty, respect, and love without conditions. He's hurt you deeply, and only time will show if he's truly willing to make this right. But you don't have to rush to make a decision. Take all the time you need, and trust that you'll know what's best for you." When I finally boarded the plane back home, my heart felt heavy yet cautiously hopeful. I had no idea what to expect from him, or even from myself. This trip had given me time to reflect, but it hadn't brought all the answers. I still had a long way to go, and so did he, if there was even a future for us. As I arrived home, the house felt different, almost foreign. The air was thick with the memories of that night, yet somehow empty, like a place I no longer recognized. My husband was waiting for me in the living room, his face drawn and tired, a shadow of the confident man I'd once known. We didn't speak much. Instead, we shared a long, silent look that held both hope and pain, the weight of everything we'd been through hovering between us. He reached out his hand, hesitant, and I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm, but also the unfamiliar distance that had grown between us. For now, I was willing to try, but I knew that the path forward was uncertain. There were no guarantees, no easy fixes. We had to rebuild, not just as a couple, but as individuals, finding our way through a maze of emotions and broken trust. The question of whether we could make it through remained unanswered, hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. As we stood there in silence, holding each other's gaze, I knew that whatever came next would be the true test of our love. And while I didn't know how this story would end, I was ready to see where it would lead. One day, one step, one honest conversation at a time. The silence between us stretched as we stood there, hands clasped, but unsure of what to say. I could see the weight of his guilt and regret in the way his shoulders slumped, in the way his gaze flickered with doubt and remorse. For so long, I had thought of him as my rock, my partner, the one who would never hurt me in a way I couldn't recover from. Now, standing in the dim light of our home, I felt like we were both on the edge of something fragile and unknown, a precipice where one wrong step could break everything we had left. He took a deep breath and broke the silence. "I know that saying sorry isn't enough, and I know it doesn't change what I did." His voice was low, unsteady. "But I want you to know that these past few weeks, they've been a wake-up call. Therapy has been forcing me to look at parts of myself I didn't want to see, things I've buried and ignored for years. I was so focused on wanting something new, something exciting, that I ignored the impact on you, on us." I let his words settle, trying to decipher my own feelings. I could sense that he was sincere, that he was facing something difficult, something raw. But sincerity didn't erase the betrayal. A part of me wanted to forgive him, to trust that he was changing, but another part, the hurt part, whispered that I'd be foolish to trust so easily again. "What I need to know," I said quietly, my voice firmer than I felt, "is why you thought lying would be okay. We set rules, boundaries. You agreed to them. So why did you feel like you could make decisions without me, hide things from me, and then expect me to just be okay with it?" He looked down, struggling with his words. I thought I could control it. I thought if I could just handle everything on my own, then you wouldn't be bothered, and everything would go smoothly. I know it sounds terrible, but I wanted to keep you out of it while still doing what I wanted. I convinced myself that because I was thinking about us, somehow it was okay to keep you in the dark. The honesty of his admission stung. He'd wanted his freedom without any of the risk, but in doing so, he'd risked everything that mattered between us. "You didn't just keep me in the dark," I said, the anger bubbling up again. "You made choices for both of us. You didn't trust me enough to be honest, to give me a say. And now here we are, dealing with the fallout of your choices." He looked pained, nodding. "You're right. I didn't trust you, and that was wrong. I see that now. But I want to earn that trust back. I don't want this to be the end of us." The sincerity in his voice tugged at me, but I couldn't just forget the betrayal, the lies. Trust isn't something that can be fixed with words. It has to be rebuilt over time, slowly, brick by brick. I took a deep breath, thinking carefully about what I wanted to say next. "We're not going to fix this overnight," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "If we're going to try, you need to understand that this will take time. You'll need to be patient with me, with the doubts and fears that I have now because of what you did. Therapy is a good start, but it won't solve everything. I need you to be committed to real change, not just for me, but for yourself." He nodded, relief and determination mixing in his expression. "I am, Sarah. I'm ready to put in the work. I know it won't be easy, and I know I've given you every reason to doubt me, but I'm here, and I'll keep showing up no matter how hard it gets." In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. I could feel that he was finally beginning to understand the depth of the pain he'd caused, and maybe, just maybe, that understanding would lead to something real. Over the next few days, we began the delicate dance of rebuilding our life together. Mornings felt tentative, our conversations cautious, both of us unsure of the boundaries in this new, fragile stage. But he was different. There was a humility in his actions, a quiet patience that hadn't been there before. He listened more, took accountability, and didn't deflect when we talked about hard truths. It was a change, a small one, but enough to show me that he was trying. One evening, he asked if I'd like to join him for a therapy session. I was hesitant, wary of delving too deeply into emotions that were still so raw, but I agreed. Sitting in that room with him, hearing him speak openly about his insecurities and his mistakes, felt surreal. He confessed fears I'd never known he had, about inadequacy, about not feeling deserving of me, about being terrified of losing me, but not knowing how to deal with that fear. It was hard to hear, painful even, but it also gave me insight into the layers beneath his betrayal. He was flawed, deeply so, and while it didn't excuse his actions, it helped me see that his mistakes had roots that went beyond our relationship. The therapy sessions became part of our routine, a safe space to unpack everything we'd hidden from each other. Slowly, I felt a flicker of trust begin to return, though I remained guarded. I told him that I needed time to rebuild our intimacy, that I wasn't ready to fully let down my walls, and he respected that. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, he turned to me and said, "I know I may never fully earn back your trust, but I'm willing to try every day. I want to build something new with you, something honest this time." His words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of something we could only hope for, not yet see. I nodded, feeling a quiet, cautious warmth settle over me. "Let's take it one day at a time," I replied, my voice soft but steady. "Let's keep working and see where it leads." As the weeks turned into months, we continued our journey, navigating the aftermath of the betrayal with patience and resilience. There were days when the pain resurfaced, days when the doubts returned, but there were also moments of laughter, of connection, of a closeness that felt new and uncharted. Our story was far from over, and the future remained uncertain. But as we held hands in the darkness, facing the unknown together, I felt a quiet strength, a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something beautiful from the broken pieces. And as I looked out into the night, I knew that whatever happened next, we were finally facing it side by side, open to whatever came our way.